Smokers who know that smoking causes cancer experience cognitive dissonance, uncomfortable inconsistency between their attitude about health and their behavior of smoking. To resolve it, some quit smoking, changing behavior to match attitude. Many more engage in creative rationalization. I exercise so it evens out. My grandfather smoked and lived to 90. Stress would kill me sooner if I quit. Cognitive dissonance reveals how motivated we are to maintain a sense of consistency and how creative we become at rationalizing when we fail. Attitudes are evaluative dispositions, positive or negative orientations toward objects, people, groups, events, or ideas. The tripartite model of attitudes identifies three components. The cognitive component consists of beliefs and thoughts about the attitude object. The affective component consists of emotional reactions and feelings. The behavioral component consists of action tendencies and past behaviors related to the attitude object. Attitudes guide information processing, bias memory, and predict behavior, particularly when attitudes are strong, accessible, and personally relevant, and when situational pressures favoring other behaviors are weak. Attitude accessibility refers to how easily and quickly an attitude comes to mind when the attitude object is encountered. Highly accessible attitudes are activated automatically. They come to mind rapidly, without deliberate effort. Less accessible attitudes require more cue or retrieval effort. Attitude accessibility predicts behavior better than attitude valence alone. Even a mildly negative attitude that is highly accessible will predict avoidance behavior more reliably than a strongly negative attitude that rarely comes to mind. Repeated expression of an attitude increases its accessibility. Petty and Cacioppo's elaboration likelihood model proposes that attitude change occurs through two routes. The central route involves deep, effortful processing of message arguments. The persuasive message is carefully evaluated, counterarguments are considered, and attitude change occurs based on the quality and logic of the arguments. The peripheral route involves superficial processing using simple heuristic cues, the communicator's attractiveness, the length of the message, the number of arguments, or audience response, without carefully evaluating the arguments themselves. Central route attitude change is stronger and more durable. Peripheral route changes are more susceptible to subsequent influence. Source characteristics are among the most powerful peripheral cues in persuasion. Two dimensions drive source credibility. Expertise, the communicator's perceived knowledge and competence in the relevant domain, and trustworthiness, the belief that the communicator is honest and not acting from self-interest. A doctor recommending a health behavior is perceived as expert. A friend recommending the same behavior is perceived as trustworthy. Interestingly, people who argue against their own apparent self-interest are particularly persuasive precisely because their trustworthiness is demonstrated by the sacrifice. Fear appeals, persuasive messages that emphasize threatening consequences of noncompliance, are widely used in public health campaigns. Extended parallel process model research shows that fear appeals are effective only when two conditions are met. The threat must be perceived as credible and personally relevant and specific. Effective coping responses must be provided. Fear without efficacy produces defensive avoidance. People dismiss or minimize the threat to avoid the unpleasant emotion. This explains why anti-drug campaigns showing terrifying consequences without empowering coping strategies often have limited effectiveness or even backfire. Festinger's cognitive dissonance theory proposes that holding two or more psychologically inconsistent cognitions, beliefs, attitudes, or knowledge of behavior produces an aversive motivational state that the person is driven to reduce. Dissonance is most powerful when the inconsistency involves the self-concept, when the behavior cannot be undone, and when the behavior had significant consequences. Dissonance can be reduced by changing an attitude to match behavior, by adding new cognitions that reconcile the inconsistency, or by reducing the importance of one of the inconsistent cognitions. In Festinger and Carlsmith's classic experiment, participants were paid either $1 or $20 to lie to another person about how interesting a boring task had been. Those paid $1 subsequently rated the task as more interesting than those paid $20. The high-pay group had sufficient external justification for their lie, $20, and experienced little dissonance. The low-pay group lacked sufficient external justification and experienced dissonance, which they resolved by changing their attitude about the task to align with what they had said. Less external inducement produces more genuine attitude change. Maguire's inoculation theory proposes that attitude resistance can be built by exposing people to weakened, refutable versions of counterarguments before they encounter powerful attacks on their attitudes, analogous to vaccination, which exposes the immune system to weakened pathogens to build resistance. Pre-inoculation, presenting and refuting weak counterarguments, produces stronger resistance to subsequent persuasion attempts than simply bolstering the original attitude with supporting arguments. Inoculation has been applied to public health messaging, media literacy training, and protection against misinformation campaigns. Attitudes and persuasion are at the heart of social influence. They determine how we vote, what we buy, how we treat others, and whether we change our minds when evidence demands it. Understanding the central and peripheral routes, the power of source credibility, and the dynamics of cognitive dissonance provides both a framework for becoming more persuasive and, crucially, more resistant to manipulation.